And good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Medtech Business Academy, sponsored by your Medtech experts. I am joined today by my colleagues, Scott Alexander and Barbara Strain. We are here to talk about, what else do you talk about at the end of the year? But the year that was, right? That's what this episode is going to be about. It's going to be about, let's talk about the year it was, because that's not cliche or anything in any sort of podcast or any sort of format like this. So we're just going to lean right into the cliches and say, hey, let's talk about 2024 and what it brought. But we're going to talk about it a little bit from the unique perspectives in case anybody doesn't know. Barbara, Scott, and myself, we are each consultants and provide value to our clients through different channels. Barbara, obviously being the czar and godmother of modern value analysis, speaks to her clients from a perspective of, what is necessary to get through the value analysis channels. Scott, from the perspective of digital lead generation and marketing, overall speaks to his clients about how they should get in front of more clients, get more interest out of the clients they could be. And the clinician exchange, which I represent, has a varied format, but we really are talking to clients about how to navigate through the journey of their product and or organizational life cycle, and how do you get insights, and then how do you execute and create adoption all the way through. So what we're going to do is talk about 2024 from the perspective of what we've seen individually through the eyes of our businesses, as well as our clients, which, if you add it all up, we're probably talking about hundreds of different companies that we all represent on a yearly basis. So it's really good insight for each of you to kind of start to set up your 2025, or at least we tell ourselves that. So with that, we're going to get started in the Medtech Business Academy. So, Scott.
Yeah.
Tell us, what made 2024 different than 2023, and even before that, from what you've done and what you've seen?
Yeah, I think the overall active marketing doesn't change in terms of what you want to do. You want to influence the way that people see a problem. You want to basically help them see the world the way that you do, and then get them to buy something. Like, that's kind of what it is. The things that we saw in MedTech are a couple big trends. One, education is becoming more and more important. So, if we think about earlier, 23, 22, 21, webinars got way overplayed, and so they were basically unusable. In 2024, we've seen webinars come back with a vengeance, because surgeons, clinicians, broadly speaking, want to know what's going on. We know that trade show attendance is down, conference attendance is down, so they're still hungry, so they're doing that. The other thing that we're seeing, and this is maybe even an even bigger shift, is we're seeing shifts in SG&A budgets. If we go back to like 2012, we had 1,000 sales reps and a given division inside some of the bigger medtech companies. They lost access, and so what we've been seeing is companies are pulling back on the number of sales professionals they have, having higher experiences and that sort of thing in their reps. And then they're shifting budget towards marketing, which is great for us. Obviously, we do a lot of marketing stuff, but it's a particular, two particular types of marketing efforts that we're seeing folks focus in on. One is that educational piece. So maybe it's webinars, but it's also white papers, and it's anything we can do to get out to try and do the top of funnel early sales cycle education work that it used to be that Randy the rep would do. Now they're trying to do that through digital means. And then the other thing is getting sales opportunities. Like, how do you actually have people raise their hand and say, yes, I want to demo your product? People are always looking for more leads, but I think we've seen more sophistication and more investment in that in 2024.
So, Scott, the thing that I've always thought about in medtech, and I drive the dichotomy to pharmaceutical. Mm-hmm. Pharmaceutical a long time ago moved, and what I think about is sales is decentralized, marketing is centralized decision making and influence, right? Yep. And pharmaceutical industry moved heavily away from that decentralized heavy reliance on sales reps to
Hmm.
the heavy reliance on marketing, and then basically having the decentralized points, those sales reps in the field
Yep.
kind of feed the marketing beast, if you will, and taking the cues from marketing.
Hmm.
Now, MedTech, because we were a little bit more transactional, and transactions could occur at the end point, which they
Yep.
couldn't occur necessarily for the pharmaceutical. They could only influence a
Hmm.
script.
Yep.
But in MedTech, right, there were transactions that occurred at the end point.
Hmm.
Still, to some degree, there can be, okay, maybe not
Yep.
necessarily a PO associated with it, but yes, I will try that on my next case, right?
Hmm.
Whatever it may be. So from that perspective, do you see this as any potential trend in that kind of
Yep.
pharmaceuticalization of we're going to start getting more centralized?
Totally. Yeah, I think so. And we see that like for younger companies, that's the model they have. And so they typically, so if you're an earlier stage company, you've got some sort of piece of capital equipment, for example, what you're going to do, your typical model is going to be, we're going to have, instead of having 20 reps, we're going to have 5, or we may have 3. And they're going to be in a central location. They'll be in Dallas. You'll have one in Atlanta. You'll have one in, San Francisco. And they're going to basically have really big geographies. And then what you're doing is you're using digital means to have the prospects raise their hand to say they're interested. So the rep in Dallas may cover the entire middle of the United States. When a prospect comes in for your widget, then you're going to basically reach out to them to schedule a Zoom call like this. And then only after that, then you would hop on a plane and bring your device and go through a demo and that sort of thing. So that's the model that we're seeing pervasively, particularly in the earlier stage companies. Yeah, and I don't think that goes away. The other thing, and this is, we'll talk about this maybe more in a future episode, but I have had more conversations with medical device companies about direct consumer campaigns in the past like month. Because at the time of recording, we're recording this sort of mid-November, and everybody is planning for 25 and October 1st through like Thanksgiving. And so we're talking to a lot of companies about what are they thinking about. And yeah, I've had more conversations in the past month about direct consumer that I've had in the previous 5 years combined.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just to get a sense, is that from like early stage, really progressive companies, or are there any like legacy, regardless of what size they are there any legacy companies that are doing that?
It tends to be earlier stage companies.
Okay.
And it tends to be devices where historically people have felt like choice didn't matter. And then they're
Like commodities? Or is it
no, like think like we've got some folks in the sleep apnea space,
okay?
Like surgical sleep apnea. So not CPAPs or things like that, where they're having a conversation. The companies want a patient to go into a provider to say, hey, I've heard about X on whatever radio, that sort of thing. Do you provide that? That's probably the clearest example that I can talk to of like
interesting
how they're using direct consumer. Yeah.
I think Inspire's done some of that in that space, haven't they? Right.
Yeah, they have a lot of commercials out.
Yeah.
A lot of commercials. And it's been effective. Like if you look at what's going on in that space, it's been very effective.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Well,
Mhm.
Barbara, how about you? Tell us about like, what have you been seeing kind of from your perspective?
Well, to sort of bounce off some of the things Scott was saying is that every organization, meaning hospitals, IDNs, all those sorts of things, all of them are practicing differently as far as being wide open, letting anyone talk to any supplier they want to, and sure, we'll bring it in, whatever. 2, we're not listening to anybody. We have to really have a need, and then you can come in. And I think some of this direct-to-patient marketing may have something to do with, it's really difficult if I've just got a niche item to really just go and try to find a KOL or an SME that's going to try to bring it through a system and things, because maybe that's only, 2% of patients that they might affect or whatever. And can they set up a whole market? So I can understand the direct marketing in that case. But just because a patient might say, hey, I've seen, this drug on there and I think I have all the symptoms, or, I hate my CPAP and I want to do this, you still have to make sure that the organization that you're talking to is readiness. And that's what I deal with a lot of my clients. They think they're going to do this whole big marketing campaign across the country, and they're going to have all these people everywhere and planning. And I go, things like, have you looked at like the latest leapfrog map and looked at what states are very, bad in certain things? And when you click on the map, you can actually go and see all of those different hospitals in that state. And are they having trouble with cardiology things, or are they having trouble with surgical site infections, et cetera? And if you've got a specific product or a category of products, go to where people need to improve. Because what I talk about with clients and what you have to remind them about is quality. And you're looking at, do they have a need? So if you can match up, it's a little bit of work, but maybe AI can help sort of scrub a lot of those things and really pinpoint, hey, if I were you in your space, here's where you should congregate your efforts. Put your money in these spots, is because that's where they really need it. If you go ahead.
I was going to ask you a question about that, but keep going.
Yeah. So I think it's what I try to tell clients is what's your quality message? What are you really trying to improve, and what's the data behind it? That's when I get crickets, when I start talking data. So data is still a thing that no matter where in the spectrum, new companies are a little bit better about having data because they've had to put so much together for their fundraising, efforts and all the different rounds they go through and all that sort of stuff and all the things they do. But some of the larger ones, they've been out for a long time, but they've focused on so many different things that the patient kind of gets left out of an equation.
Do you find on that piece of data, Barbara, one of the things that we're starting to see more and more is a willingness for companies to understand that there's more than just a surgeon or a clinician in a buying process, and that they do need to have marketing efforts around the financial people at the VAC and the operational folks at the VAC and nursing and maybe even IT, right? And that sort of broader understanding of the purchasing process. I feel like we're getting a little sophistication in that, but curious to get your take.
Yeah, we talk about personas. So I try to make up deliverables so it has a little bit of stuff at the beginning and the end, and then it's plug and play. So that who are you talking to? But there are still companies who say, well, just introduce me to the CEO and I'll take it from there and no problem. And I'm going, that's not how it works, in general.
But so you brought up, and I love that point because I've always raised that thought process of go to healthcare.gov, look up the information, look at infection rates, look at those quality scores. And I talked about this recently with a client. A small client, okay, and not necessarily engaged beyond the clinical level per se, trying to get to value analysis, trying to figure that out. And then, so we talked about leapfrog scores. We talked about those things. And they're like, yeah, that's great. When my reps talk to the rank and file, I'm using that word loosely, but the everyday clinicians, physicians, nurses, just going about doing their job on a daily basis, checking the board in the surgical room and going through it, or the ICU nurses caring for all these patients. They don't know. They don't know about that data. That stuff is detached from them, right? And they're like, yeah, that's great when I can get to a value analysis, but I have to drive interest at the clinical level to get moved up. So how do I relate that information and be like, hey, healthcare.gov said that everybody that walks in here gets an infection. Maybe you should fix that. And they're like, we don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's an internal problem with people I used to work for and things. I mean, we broadcast it. We would have these meetings specifically, and it would be part of it, and say, okay, here's where we need to do better, and you could watch our scores. I remember when we went from a low leapfrog to all the way to B and A, and we had balloons and we had celebrations and we told everybody internally, and then it goes, viral and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of disconnects about that. But if you're careful about how you prepare your material, you can actually show it to them so it's not you just telling them. Because people would come in and say, hey, I know you have a problem with, and I go, no, we don't. Here's our score, and here's where we are. And we look at it every day. We would have all of our quality metrics up every single day. We all got together for a 15-minute stand-up meeting, and we'd go over that stuff. So it just depends. So I go back to my clients is you have to understand where each of your potential customers or even your current customers, what are their needs, learn about how they do their business. So more people are coming to me asking about those sorts of things. How can I speak the language within? How could I get, and when I get there, what do I need to really, show people?
What do you see in Skender?
Yeah. So from our business, I think, and I'll talk to the dichotomy of really the two sides of our business. In our upstream vertical, where we do a lot of market research, what we're starting to see is a lot of companies starting to come to us a little, particularly in the last 3 months, companies that have launched products in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And you could tell that some of them were launched veritably hastily. Just because of the circumstances of COVID, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it was a response to COVID and, whatever it may be. But now they're starting to be like, where the uptake didn't quite happen, right? And they're reversing course now and starting to go back and say, did we do a proper needs assessment? Did we really evaluate, concept feedback? Was this really is this just something that clinicians say that, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, but we're never going to change their do behavior? Do they actually do something with it? So we're starting to see some of that come back. On the opposite side, on more of the, I guess, quote unquote, traditional staffing front, one of the things that we've seen is 2024 has been filled a year with census numbers are significantly up across healthcare, right?
Yep.
You look at the revenue numbers for all the hospital systems, they're up significantly, right? Procedures are up significantly. Therefore, our customers are seeing uptakes in demand for products, revenue uptakes, et cetera. We're seeing all that. However, one of the things that we're also seeing is there is not quite the growth rate in the internal teams and the resources to go back. There was some thoughts that, okay, we made layoffs. That was reactionary to what happened in 2022. Okay, in 2023, I get that. But when things start to cook again, we'll just start adding headcount again. And I've talked to multiple people who are placing these requisitions, and they're like, I don't know if HR is not listening. I don't know if the finance department is not listening, but I am down 8 people from 2022. I put in a requisition for 4, and they're like, maybe we'll talk about 1 in 2026.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, I just want to get back to 50% of where I was. And they're not being granted it. And I think, there is this idea where I think the entire community is starting to say, hey, what can you do with what you have? And where can you find flex? Right. Now, obviously, I'm self-promoting a little bit here, but some of that dynamic is where can you create flex capacity? Right? Why do we have to have this fixed capacity? There was a reason why we reduced headcount. You referenced it before, SG&A, right? Now they're saying, hey, we're working on these lower SG&A numbers.
Yeah.
I get it. You're seeing this high demand come on, but I don't know if I want to add a bunch of W-2s.
And you're talking about on like the provider side, or are you talking about the manufacturers
I'm
themselves?
talking about the manufacturing side.
I totally see that.
Yes.
100%. Yep.
Yep. Like,
I mean,
and it's everywhere. It's in the marketing departments.
Mhm.
It's in the field. It's sales. It's clinical. It's everywhere. We're seeing it. We've seen it in project management. We've seen it everywhere where they're like, okay, yeah, we get it. We're up 10% this year. That's a great year. We're all excited. People are like, okay, well, I can get some of my staff back. No.
Doesn't work that way.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest trends. That's not just going to be a 24, 25 trend. I think this is the way the world works now. It's fractional. I'm going to bring in just what I need, right? Whether you're talking about a C-suite individual, you're talking about execution, which frankly is why the three of us have healthy growing businesses. I mean, that's the world that we're in now. And it totally makes sense, right? If you think about it, you're taking a flyer. If I hire a clinical manager, right, to help manage implementations for my widget, I'm taking a flyer that like this person knows what they do and they don't just interview really well, versus like I can go to a clinician exchange, for example, and hire a team that's doing this like 50 times across all kinds of things and have SOPs and all that. Like it just makes sense. So,
well, the other side of that, and this is where the SG&A dynamic comes into this, is the fact that it's also a leap of faith, because when you're hiring based on projected trends and what's already there. Yep. So I think what happened was in 2022 and 2023, it's like, okay, well, we hired all these people under the auspices that the growth curve was going to keep going. Yeah, we have a spike in demand right now. Yep. But if I hire a W-2 employee and things turn in 2025 or 2026, then I'm stuck with that on my books, right? As opposed to flexing in a fractional capacity, things start to turn, we can cut that a lot faster, right? And that's where I think really it's that behavior and some of the battle scars from the last few years are impacting future thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing is on the provider side is there is lot of staffing issues. And so they get a lot of fatigue if you're bringing in something new all the time, or you want to do an evaluation. They used to get fatigue before, but now it's, I need to get my job done and I have fewer people to get it done. I have more patients to take care of. I don't have the time or bandwidth. And is it really going to make that much difference? That's why the need has to really be there. But what companies need to think of, and we'll talk about this when we kick off 2025 in a few weeks, kind of do a little teaser, right? Is that we have to figure out on the manufacturing industry side, what can we do to help to alleviate some of those things? And it could just be you're not selling new products, but you're repositioning your old ones to say, have you maximized all of the functionality that product will actually do for you? Because sometimes they bring it in, but they operationalize it the way they operationalized and used the old one the same way with the new one. But the new one has 3 more things you could do to really take care of that, but they were too busy or, just didn't want to take care of it at the time.
So I recently had dinner with a very high-level executive at a major urban IDN, and I was asking them about their turnover rates, and they were proud. They said that they've gotten it down to under 3% over the last 18 months. Okay, wow. Yeah, which is shocking to me. And basically, they attributed that to a couple different things. First of all, there was fatigue, primarily in the nursing community, with all the bouncing, right? It was like, okay, this is great. I can be a mercenary and tomorrow I can make $20 more an hour and then I can make another $30 an hour. But then they kind of missed that communal sense. They never had consistency. So there was a little bit of that return to, okay, I just want to know this is my job and this is where I go. So what percentage of that decline is attributed to that? Who knows? There's a certain percentage that is. The second thing that she referenced too was a massive focus on employee engagement. And that's a trend across all of industries, not just healthcare, not just providers, but basically, and it goes to what you were talking about before, Scott, education. the hospitals have recognized that, hey, we are going to create an entire employee engagement program to make sure that people are aware, that people know what's happening, and we're going to try to give them tools. The one thing that she said, kind of bringing this full circle for all of us here, is they're relying heavily on the vendor community. Because some of the people that they've laid off in the provider world are the clinical educators. Clinical educators have been some of the most expendable people within the staff ranks of providers. Whereas, this IDN used to have one at each hospital. Now they have one for the entire health system, right? And so can you imagine trying to get an appointment with that person and get that person on there? So they've contacted the vendor community and said, hey, you have this much business with us here. We need you to come in and create greater education opportunity for our people. That's unique. That's a unique approach.
Yeah.
And that leads to something that I've been saying is, and all of us in value analysis is this year, partnerships. You've got to develop partnerships with your suppliers. So it can't just be, here's a widget, I just sold it, great, I get commissions and I go away. It's that total engagement with the provider. Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing too on that front, and I've seen this a little bit, but maybe this is as much I'm trying to like educate people towards where I think it's going, but we're starting to see a little bit more interest and acceptance of going deep in given accounts. So, it's not about getting as many logos as you can get on the front of your site. If you were to go to Mercy, right, my old stomping grounds, we had 44 hospitals. We had 3 that were 800 beds or more. And I think Oklahoma City was 800, but anyway, we had a couple of really big ones. And we get somebody in St. Louis and they wouldn't go to Springfield, or they couldn't get into Springfield, or they didn't spend the time on it. And they think that it's like my job to get Springfield to buy stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. And so maybe this is just wishful hope, wishful dreaming, but one of the things that I've started to see a little bit more, started having more conversations about, and then I think will continue as a trend is when you get into a Mercy, a BJC, a Saint somewhere, whatever it is, how do you get as much of the share of wallet as you can, knowing that education and relationship and just spending time really solidifying those accounts gets the business, maximizes your share of wallet, and minimizes the likelihood that you're going to have some sort of competitive threat in that account if you set it up right the first time.
Yeah.
So customer relationship, man.
So actually caring about your customers, I think is
that's very novel. I think that's the big takeaway from today. So let's start wrapping it up here, just because we're peaking at time here. Barbara, what's your big takeaway from today?
So my big takeaway is more and more people are leaning on what I call value creation, both in providers and suppliers. You've got to look at how am I going to create value, which means you're making better quality, keeping the patient at the center of things. But that money situation sort of works itself out, no matter which side of the healthcare you're on.
Yeah.
How about you, Scott?
My big takeaway, business is simple. It's just not easy. And, I think, Skender, the point that you made, kind of jesting is dead on straight, is like, just actually build relationships, think about driving value, like you said, Barbara, focus on how you're serving your customers better than someone else can serve them. And if you do that, then guess what? You're going to be perfectly fine. You're going to be growing. And I think understanding too the dynamics of like the buying process, I would say that's incredibly important, particularly as you start to think about technology is only growing. We actually have clients that are getting leads through ChatGPT now. In fact, one of our clients got a new customer because somebody searched ChatGPT for what they did, and they showed up, and now they have this customer. So I think we have to be prepared for that educational piece to be able to help people learn when they want to. So anyway,
love it. Last thing for me is going to be just embrace the concept of fractionality. I think the finance chiefs are at the place where they've held on to their money. They're not letting it go. They're going to be they're just going to hold on to that. And as a result of that, until things are at a maximum pain point, where you say we absolutely cannot produce another widget, we absolutely cannot produce another resource, whatever it is, then maybe they'll give you one resource when you're asking for four. But if you embrace the concept and create systems that allow for fractionality within and understand that there can be benefit even to you, that there's value. I think that's where we are in the economy.
Totally agree.
So with that, thank you to both of my co-hosts today. We're very excited to bring you the final episode in a few weeks about the 2025 predictions that we'll have. But we hope that the rest of your 2024 goes swimmingly. And we wish everybody an early happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks.